and welcome to a cover story conversation. The elections in the United States have taken a very interesting turn. We have Joe Biden, the sitting president, opting out at what is almost the last minute with a few months left to go for the polls, about 100 days. We have also Kamala Harris, the vice president, who has already created history as the first person of Indian descent and the first woman to be vice president. She is all set to capture the Democratic nomination for president. What does it mean and what will be the impact for India? That is something I'm going to be discussing with Chidanand Rajghatta. He is the foreign editor and the US Bureau Chief for Times of India. But more importantly, he's also written this book, Kamala Harris, The Phenomenal Woman. I have a copy of it with me. Chidanand, you wrote this 4 years ago, but now the book is, I think, back into circulation along with Kamala Harris's candidacy. So first, your impressions of Kamala Harris's bid.
Well, yeah, I mean, she was the vice president and she was going to be on the ticket with President Biden again. And, a series of circumstances have actually catapulted her to the top of the ticket. Even if you read the book, actually, there's an epilogue where I kind of, foresaw this situation because even when, he won his first term, President Biden, he was already 77, 78 then. And there was already talk that he's too old, to get a second term. And a lot of people believed, and I certainly did, that he was going to be a one-term president. But I don't think many people anticipated that Kamala Harris would kind of step in so smoothly into, as the Democratic nominee so quickly and so smoothly, so effortlessly almost. So that part, the speed with which that has happened is a surprise. But what was not surprising is Biden bailing out, although, he had to be kind of coaxed out, eased out, cajoled out, and so on. But yeah, here we are on the cusp of history again.
Yes, here we are, and here you were. I mean, 4 years ago, as you said, you predicted it, and the fact that I think it was also expected at some point she may perhaps have to replace Biden, but not in such a dramatic fashion. But how do you see her moves so far? We've seen what she's done with Netanyahu, for instance. She's coming into her own. So a bit about her in the present context, and then of course we go to her backstory.
Right. Yeah. Look, the thing is, she has been one of the more consequential vice presidents. Increasingly, look, in the old days, and up until I'd say the 1990s, a vice president was generally seen as, it was he was a sideshow to the president. And typically, the joke was back in those days that vice presidents were always sent out to attend funerals. And at one time, I looked up. Who came for Indira Gandhi's funeral. I think it was George W. Bush. It happened during the Reagan presidency. And then again, when Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated, I'm not sure if, who was it? Dan Quayle. I don't remember. But generally, vice presidents were sort of sent out to attend funerals and, do...
Cut ribbons.
Yeah, so on. But increasingly, I think it began with Bill Clinton and Al Gore. Gore got an important portfolio, the environment, which started to become a hot button topic those days. And even there, he was actually fairly restricted to that area. But subsequently, when George W. Bush became president, Dick Cheney had a fairly significant role. He was a very influential, foreign policy, person. And then when Obama became president, Joe Biden, as his vice president, was also fairly influential in the sense that Biden was seen as a titan in foreign relations. He'd been a senator for many years. He also headed the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So in terms of attending to foreign policy matters, Obama did give him a lot of leeway. And then when Biden became president, and because of his age, there were a lot of questions on, who would be his vice president and whether that person would be fit to step into, his shoes or, into the Oval Office in case anything happened to him. And so literally, I think Kamala Harris probably, had the widest possible portfolio, handed to her. It was not just foreign policy. I mean, you speak of Netanyahu or meeting Netanyahu, But even when she was vice president, she met Prime Minister Modi, for instance, when he visited. She was sent out often abroad. Say, for instance, I think she fairly regularly went to the Munich Security Conference. She traveled quite a bit. And then domestically, of course, she had some of the most important issues and issues which are often considered very hard, tough, intractable, like, the border, the immigration issue, or voting rights, things like that. So she's had a full plate, and she's had 4 years of a lot of hard work, not always recognized. There are other reasons for it, the kind of genderism and uh, sexism that is prevalent in the US and pretty much across the world for that matter.
Hmm.
The bar is always higher for women. But yeah, I mean, she's had 4 years of fairly intense training. How well she did, that's a matter of dispute. A lot of people think she was a dud. She was not as sort of spectacular. She
Hmm.
worked very quietly, I think, for the most part, on very difficult issues. So yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised at all. I think she's prepared. She's ready for the presidency at a very, very difficult time in the US and in the world.
Correct. In fact, you talked about it being a barrier-shattering ascent, and I like the way you began your book when you talk about women presidents in the U.S., and then of course they're all fictional women presidents, and either they
Right.
are, for some, if there's not availability of men or something, so it's now she's actually now making fiction come true in that sense also. So there's a lot of barrier-shattering, glass breaking that's going to be happening apart from the difficult time in the world. Um, compare her, say, to Hillary Clinton's bid, and how has her, the Democrats, and how is the US treating her rise as compared to the other women who wanted to become, who had aspirations?
Well, with Hillary Clinton, I think she was a kind of understudy as a spouse, as a first lady,
Hmm.
in the house. She saw the inner workings of the White House at very close quarters. And then, of course, she went on to, become a senator, before she, won the Democratic nomination, and that itself was very significant. And if you look back, I mean, people tend to forget that Hillary Clinton actually won the popular vote against Trump, and by a huge margin, actually 3 million. She got 3 million more votes than Trump in 2016. Except that the US political system, the electoral system, is designed in such a way that the popular votes don't matter, right? And even
Hmm.
now, and say Kamala Harris is, neck and neck with Trump, they're both polling 45% each, or Trump is leading 46, 45, or Kamala Harris is leading 46, 45. That doesn't matter. It all boils down to what's called the Electoral College in the US, and electoral votes. Each state has a particular number of electoral votes, depending on its sort of size, population, so on. And whoever wins the most, I mean, majority of electoral votes, there are 538 electoral votes. You win 270 and you become the president, even if you don't win the popular vote. Republicans haven't won popular votes in the last, 4 or 5 elections. They have actually lagged behind even George Bush, I think, polled fewer popular votes than his rival. But electorally, if you win enough electoral votes, enough states,
Hmm.
and particularly what are called battleground states. So out of 50 states, say about 20 states are almost predetermined. Republicans win 20 states, the Democrats win 20
Hmm.
states, and about 230 or 240 electoral votes are guaranteed, for each side, or maybe even 200 are guaranteed. So it's only this, 8 to 10 battleground states, and even there, I think about 6 states are very, very tightly contested, right?
Okay.
So
Hmm.
in the 2016 election, if you remember, Donald Trump, he actually, there were 3 states which he won by very narrow margins, right? Michigan was one, which I think he won by 24,000 votes or something like that, and Pennsylvania was the other one, and Wisconsin. And these 3 states, even now, they're considered the most hard fought, and they're very, very narrow. And even in these states, it boils down to one or two cities, actually. For instance, in Michigan,
Hmm.
a lot of parts of rural America, which is white and rural, tends to vote Republican. And in this
Okay.
election too, they go to Trump. But it's the urban centers, and particularly cities which have a large diverse population, mixed population, or black population, for instance. Detroit in Michigan, Philadelphia in Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
uh, Milwaukee in Wisconsin, Atlanta in Georgia. So what happens is they almost 90% of the states geographically may vote for Trump and Republicans, but the city of Philadelphia can overturn that margin because there's a heavy concentration of black voters in Philadelphia or
Hmm.
Detroit or Atlanta, which is a sort of black majority city. So it all boils down to these, few thousand votes, and that was what happened. Has happened over the last 2 or 3 elections. And so, yeah, it's the whole battle between Democrats, Republicans, and in this election, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will
Hmm.
boil down to these battleground states.
Okay, you talked about her, the fact that she met Prime Minister Modi. She also was, she's traveled all over the world, but she hasn't yet come to India. She, as vice president, she hasn't visited India. Second, her meeting with Modi, it was, she also, I won't say pulled him up, but she did raise the issue of Kashmir and the abolition of Article 370, and she was, uh, not very supportive of that. So, in that sense, how do you see the impact on India of a possible Kamala Harris presidency?
Look, I mean, I have this problem of us Indians
Hmm.
expecting anybody of Indian origin to somehow be of more supportive or leaning towards India. Look, the bottom line is whether it's Kamala Harris or Rishi Sunak or whoever.
Hmm.
Uh, Tomorrow, Canada might have a prime minister of Indian origin, and he might turn out to be even more, anti-India. Look, they represent their country, the country of their birth, country of their citizenship, and we should not be surprised by that. And in recent years, it's a fact that Democrats are tougher on things like human rights and issues like that. So we can expect that. And then a Trump presidency, because Trump doesn't really give a uh, damn about human rights.
Hmm.
Any country would get a free pass on that because his emphasis is on other stuff, more important stuff for him, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if Kamala Harris becomes president, I don't think we can expect any
Concessions.
soft or kid glove treatment. But having said that, I am also of the belief that India is now too big to be bothered by these things. Really, I mean, who cares what any country thinks, right? I mean, yeah, sure, you should pay attention to international community, but addressing our human rights issues is our problem. People, I mean, Kamala Harris, Democrats, the European Union, Scandinavian countries may all come down on us, but we should be able to take it in our stride. Sure, I think the criticism is valid, by the way, but
Hmm.
that's fine. We address it, on our terms, and taking pride in the quality of human rights and human relationships is something we should be worried about for ourselves, not to impress others. So yeah,
Fair enough.
I wouldn't particularly be bothered, concerned about Kamala Harris coming. I'd rather, people hold us to account and, hold
Hmm.
our feet to the fire than just let us give a free pass. And we should explain that, yeah, we are a work in progress, right? I mean, I actually like our current approach, uh, because India is not shy of pointing out, really, United States, you think you have great human rights? So, we all are work in progress, whether it's US or
Hmm.
um, European countries. Every country has its problems, and we are all informed and formed out of our historical experience. So please respect that.
Well, you also spoke about, that she's coming at a time where, at a very interesting point, a turning point in terms of China, in terms of US relations with the rest of the world. How do you see her handling, for instance, the China question?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there is, I think, uniform mistrust of China in the US, as in
True.
India. So at
Mm.
least in the issue of China, we'll probably be on the same page, or at least similar page. And Pakistan is now completely marginal to every country's concern. I actually, yesterday, I was looking up when was the last time a US president visited Pakistan, and I had a hard time. Clinton and Bush both made very brief sort of stopovers in the middle of the night,
Mhm.
almost dishes. But after that, Obama didn't go to Pakistan, during his 2 terms. Trump did not go. Biden did not go. Uh, so yeah. I mean, I think the interesting thing will be the approach towards, the Atlanticist approach, which, Democrats and Biden, or for that matter, all US presidents, bar Trump, has had, towards NATO and so on. That I think there'll be continuity with that. If Trump comes, it's quite likely that Ukraine will get thrown under the bus,
Mm.
uh, and all of NATO countries and the European Union will like kind of shrivel up under his withering attacks. But otherwise, there'll be continuity, which a lot of Americans actually um, have problems with, right? I mean,
Mm.
the interesting thing is a lot of Americans, actually support Trump's foreign policy, particularly, Middle America, because they think, what is this country doing, throwing, trillions of dollars into wars in Afghanistan, first Iraq, and then now Ukraine.
Mm.
uh, is it really necessary? And so that you step back, and that's a fundamentally two different visions, right? The Democrat vision, Biden's vision, or for that matter, both Republican and Democrat presidents over the last 20 or 30 years have believed in NATO. um, but a lot of Republicans, MAGA Republicans particularly, believe NATO is just a warmongering organization, and if NATO had not pushed so close to the Russian borders,
Mm.
there had never been this problem with
The first
Europe and
place.
with Ukraine, and that's a fairly valid point, right? A lot of people in India too believe that what was the necessity of NATO's continued existence and expansion when the Soviet Union collapsed and Russia was at its weakest, and it was actually there were Russians, I think it was Gorbachev or Yeltsin, I forget, who actually begged, let us into NATO too, right? I mean,
Mm.
Gorbachev actually, I think, asked Clinton, we'd like to be members of NATO.
Mm.
Uh, and he was rebuffed. Imagine if that had happened, now you would have a NATO with Russia in NATO, and they'd be
Correct.
squared up against China. It sounds so much more logical, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's the thing is, I think with Kamala Harris, foreign policy there'll be a continuity with what Obama and Biden sort of undertook, greater engagement or continued engagement with NATO. And the Republicans, MAGA Republicans, see them as hawks. But there was a time when actually the Republicans were seen as foreign policy hawks and militaristic, uh,
Mm.
hawkish. So yeah, I see a continuity in foreign policy if Kamala Harris comes to the White House. It's a big if, a long way to go.
But she's raised the, I mean, she's got a lot of funding and she has suddenly, 100 days is a long time in politics. So do you still think it's such a big if, or is there, how do you rate her chances?
I think it's a big if only because
Mm.
the way like I said, they explained the electoral college is structured. So
Yeah.
even if she wins 5 million or 8 million more popular votes,
Mm.
and it could well happen simply because of the demographic changes. America's, the population has grown. There are more and more newer immigrants, legal immigrants who have become citizens and will vote, and they tend to vote Democratic. But the way the electoral college is structured, it's very conceivable that Trump will win the electoral college even if he loses the popular vote. One. In the off chance, if you think, somehow, Kamala Harris will win the electoral college too, right? Then Trump has already laid down the line. Look, this is a man who has very openly and publicly said, I will not recognize any result other than the one which declares me the winner.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Anything else is cheating. Right? In the Trump and MAGA playbook. Right?
So are you expecting?
Oh, yeah. January 6th, you bet. And this time it might happen earlier. On November 5, the results come out and it shows, Kamala Harris winning. Don't for a moment expect that Trump will phone her and say, congratulations, laughing Kamala, you won and I concede. No way. Not going to happen. Hell will break loose. Okay, because very clearly these guys have laid down the line that, the only result they'll recognize is if Trump wins, if he wins. So, yeah, I see a very hard road ahead. Not just the next 100 days or so, but even after, because election day is November 5. And the votes, this is a very strange American system, right? Even though the election results are you get it on November 5 or 6. Right, the new president was sworn in on January 20th. So there's like almost 2.5 months of lame duck presidency. And remains the president till January 20th, and Kamala Harris remains the vice president, even if the Democrats have won. And I don't know if you know the reason for that is, this is the problem with the system, which is 250 years old. In the old days, once the election took place, all the votes and all the people had to come on horseback, from far off distances.
Oh, I didn't know that, but that's very interesting.
Winter, and that too in winter, November, December. So the official new president or swearing in happens on January 20th. Always, it's set in stone, and
that is why. Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, there's going to be an absolute turmoil. Unless Trump wins, the electoral college comfortably, right? In which case, he will gloat for 2.5 months and insist that they,
So I don't know which verdict you guys must be praying for, or the rest of the world is praying for. But on that note, thank you so much for this conversation, which has been pretty enlightening. And I do hope to have more conversations with you in the next few, at least the next 100 days for sure. But thank you so much for talking to me and to NewsX.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.